Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with James Dickman. Coming up tonight, services are taking place across London to mark the 5th anniversary of the Grenfell Tower disaster that claimed 72 lives in June 2017.
We have to see someone see the inside of a jail cell for this. It just cannot be allowed that people get away with murder.
A last-minute legal challenge to the government's Rwanda plans fails to stop the first deportation flight to aircraft expected to leave for Africa this evening. We'll also have an update on London's weather as well in the next 10 minutes, also on the way tonight. A celebration of women in sport is coming to Box Park in London, hoping to inspire girls and change attitudes. We'll hear from Team GB runner Jodie Williams on her role in the initiative. And we'll have highlights from the new Buzz Lightyear film. Alicia was on the blue carpet for last night's premiere of the newest iteration from the Toy Story franchise, starring Chris Evans in the title role. It's all on the way, but first tonight, events have been taking place to mark the 5 years since the Grenfell Tower fire. The blaze killed 72 people in North Kensington on the 14th of June 2017. These were the scenes at the memorial service, which was held this morning at Westminster Abbey. The Bishop of Kensington addressing the congregation, saying there was a sense of injustice, grief and sadness felt by the community following the fire. Theresa May and the Mayor among those at the service. Well, this afternoon, a 72-second silence was also held at Westfield Shopping Centre. The names of the victims were read out over the public address system. And tonight, survivors will join the families of those who died for a silent walk from the base of the tower. Among those who survived the disaster is Karim Musili. He says today is a moment to reflect and remember those who were lost.
We spend a lot of pretty much the whole year, fighting or campaigning or whatever you want to call it. And today, or the 14th, it was all about remembering the families that we lost. Remembering my uncle. I mean, he was a massive part of my life, and I wish he was around now because I need him now more than I ever did. And, some of the things that he taught me and the lessons that I learned from him, I'm now passing on to my son. And, it makes me happy, but at the same time sad that he's not there to see it. He's not there to see my kids grow up the way he saw us grow up. And, I want to, we want to make sure that we never forget them. We never forget who they were, their personalities, the 18 kids that we lost. I mean, they're not just names, they're not just numbers. They were people with souls, with real lives, and we miss them, and we wish we could have them back. But we know that there's nothing that we can do to make them come back. There's nothing that we can do to heal the pain that we're going through. But at least we remember them together, and through doing what we're doing, hopefully one day they can be remembered, not the way that they are now by this culture of neglect, but by some positivity that came out of it, and people's lives were saved because of them.
Well, Iman lives in Markland House nearby. She has shared her story from that night and how what happened has affected the entire community.
You can't get away or forget what happened. It's there, it's in front of us all the time. Anywhere you go, you see Grenfell Tower now. I'm sure it was the case before, but we didn't realize. So you go to Golborne Road, you see the tower. You go to anywhere near the area, you see the tower. As a resident of Selchester, I don't think anyone pay attention to the surrounding areas. People didn't get enough help, although people at Selchester, they have relatives, they have friends. It feels it's not fair that we've been treated differently We're fighting, but we definitely been treated differently.
Iman Yosri there, more on the Grenfell anniversary throughout tonight's programme. Well, moving on, the government has said it won't be deterred by criticism over its plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. Protests have continued today over the controversial policy, which ministers say will help tackle human trafficking across the Channel. The first flight to the African country scheduled to depart this evening.
The point is that we want to establish the principle of this route. We need to make sure that people are going to Rwanda and we break the business model of these people traffickers.
Well, those who've spoken out against the policy include the church leaders and Prince Charles, who said it was immoral. Well, Hebe Campbell has more on tonight's flight and the background to the plan.
The plane taking refugees from the UK to Rwanda is on the runway now at the Ministry of Defence base Boscombe Down ahead of the flight later today. The 5-year policy trial will send refugees to claim asylum in Rwanda instead of the UK. This controversial policy is aimed to deter migrants from making the dangerous crossing across the Channel, such as on small boats or in lorries. Originally, 130 people were aimed to be on the flight, but legal challenges have meant that the number is now 7, with the possibility of this shrinking even further.
We always said that this was going to be a long process. If you remember when I first announced the policy, I said it would take a long time to get going and there would be plenty of legal challenges, there would be bumps on the road. But I think what opponents of the policy have to say is, well, what is your alternative? What is your alternative to people being shipped across the Channel in very frail, unseaworthy dinghies, risking their lives and undermining the rule of law? What's your alternative? We think it's a sensible partnership we've set up with Rwanda. Yes, it may take a while to get working properly, but it doesn't mean we're not going to keep going.
Only today, the Supreme Court rejected an appeal bid over a judge's refusal to block the removal of an asylum seeker due to be deported. A further 2 other appeals were rejected in the last few days as well. Charities and lawyers representing asylum seekers have taken this legal action against the Home Office unsuccessfully, with others raising questions as to whether Rwanda is a safe destination and possibly breaking the European Convention on Human Rights. The entire senior leadership of the Church of England also denounced plans to deport migrants to Rwanda as an immoral policy that shames Britain in a letter to the Times, which was published today.
Right, some other stories from the capital today. The Mayor has written to 4 London Conservative MPs, urging them to lobby the Prime Minister and Transport Secretary over more government support for TfL. Sadiq Khan's letter was sent to Sir Bob Neal, Stephen Hammond, Elliot Colburn and David Simmons, politicians who are thought to have voted against Boris Johnson in the confidence vote. It urges them to speak out on so-called government attacks on London. TfL needs around £900 million in funding to get it through the rest of the financial year. At least one of the MPs involved has described the Mayor's move as another attempt to pass the buck. The Conservative MP, who was arrested on suspicion of rape and sexual assault offences spanning 7 years, has been rebailed until mid-August. The unnamed man in his 50s also faces allegations of indecent assault, abuse of position of trust and misconduct in public office. The offences are claimed to have taken place in London between 2002 and 2009. The police watchdog says 4 police officers have been served with gross misconduct notices in connection with the strip search of a black schoolgirl. It happened in East London in 2020. The girl, known as Child Q, was searched without adults present in the knowledge she was on her period. Let's just take a quick look at the weather for you now. It's getting hotter. It's reaching 27 degrees tomorrow after a warm day today as well. Some cloud cover coming in overnight and into Thursday, but still staying at around that 27-degree mark. Looking ahead to Friday, predicted to be reaching 31 degrees during the afternoon in some places in central London. So a very hot day to come. Right, stay with us. Coming up in just a few short minutes. New stats suggest over half of LGBTQ+ employees act differently at work than in their personal lives to avoid discrimination. Well, we'll hear about a new workplace charter that looks to help those not feel the need to edit their identity to fit in. Stay with us.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News with James Dickman on this lovely sunny evening in the capital. Now, according to new research, more than half of LGBTQ+ employees act differently at work than in their personal lives to avoid discrimination. A study commissioned by the retailer The Body Shop also said nearly a quarter felt they had to leave their job because of harassment due to their sexual orientation, while the company has launched something called the Work in Pride Charter, which they say is a formal commitment of support to LGBTQ+ employees and customers in the hope they can inspire change nationwide. Well, Erica Rose from The Body Shop is with me now. Erica, thank you for joining me. Just taking a look at some of your stats here, a lot of them quite surprising and quite worrying, particularly in this day and age.
Yes, absolutely, James. Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, quite shocking, as you've mentioned there in the data. it's quite shocking to see that, a third of our LGBTQ+ colleagues, are too scared to be themselves in the workplace. Over half will change their personality or change their appearance to be in the workplace. And in 2022, it isn't where we should be. As a member of the LGBTQ+ community myself, I've experienced this firsthand, and I'm absolutely in support of what we're trying to do as the Body Shop in raising awareness of this continued issue, of our continued work with Mind Out, the mental health LGBTQ+ service provider, and we want to introduce and encourage others to introduce a Working Pride Charter or something similar. And this is a charter where we set out a commitment to support all of our LGBTQ+ colleagues across the UK to be their true selves in the workplace, to express themselves, to wear what they want to wear, and to be who they want to be, so that they can be their truest, authentic self in the workplace.
Yeah, in terms of people wearing what they want to wear and expressing their true identity, do you think there's an issue in terms of some businesses, some professions not being able to catch up quite with the change in the way people like to express themselves, and there's now sort of a divide between employers wanting people to look professional, so to speak, and worrying about, the kind of wanting to express yourself side of things? Is that an issue that kind of needs to be ironed out?
Absolutely, and I think we all know there will be certain careers, there'll be certain jobs where it's more difficult, where there's a health and safety requirement or PPE is needed. Of course, there's always going to be exclusions and there's going to be differences. However, where there is an opportunity to if you're working in store, working in an office, where you can be yourself and it isn't detrimental to how you perform at work. If anything, to be able to wear what you want and express yourself, then you're going to be able to give your full energy into being a better colleague, a better employee, someone who can perform better and to focus on the job in hand. Whether you work in store and you're connecting with customers, you're living that real experience that a customer can connect with. Customers don't come into stores in a uniform. They want to see real people. But also in offices, we want people to be themselves. In our warehouse, we want people to feel free to express themselves as they truly are, and to not have to hide or change or wear something that they don't feel comfortable in, and they start feeling like they're editing a massive part of their personality and their lived experience.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you said yourself you have felt personally affected by this in the past. If you don't mind sort of talking about that, what kind of experiences did you go through in terms of that also matched up with some of the people you spoke to in your research that you went, yeah, that's what I experienced? Yeah. Was it mostly sort of microaggressions, passive aggressiveness? What kind of thing did you see?
It's that feeling that you have inside, that you have to edit. If you have a worry, you have a massive concern that you may not be liked, you may not be included, you may not have the same opportunities to progress in a business as your heterosexual colleagues. And, I remember up until the point that we formed our LGBTQ+ employee network, which is called TBS Together, up until that point, although we said we were a diverse company and we were inclusive and we wanted to be, there was no visible examples of that. And having that employee network was a massive contributor for me personally to be my true self, to not edit and have to think about, do I call out my wife? Do I say partner? Do I have to think about it? And it's the energy that you have to put in to thinking about that in a conversation that is wasted energy that could be utilised to have a better, more constructive conversation, to have, as I say, better performance in the workplace, where you can focus on the job in hand and what you should be focusing on.
Erica, thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Thank you.
Erica Rosedale on the Work in Pride Charter they are launching at the Body Shop. Now, A new campaign has launched this month in the capital that hopes to champion women in sport and inspire the next generation of female athletes and sports enthusiasts. Well, the hashtag Women Who Play campaign, with an X instead of an E in the word women, will see the box parks in Wembley, Croydon and Shoreditch all transformed. They've created an all-women's sports team for the events taking place, with some top female names in their chosen sports to take part. Well, to unpack all that was Team GB sprinter Jodie Williams, who joined me.
It's a really awesome initiative, actually. I'm very honoured to be a part of it. There's 12 women, basically a starting lineup, running parallel with the Women's Euros. And it's basically an initiative aimed at getting women and girls involved in sport. And what I think is really cool is it's not just playing sport, it's actually getting involved in sport in all aspects: broadcasting, comms, playing sports behind the scenes. So, yeah.
So it's all happening at the box parks around London, 3 of which that there are. Tell us a little bit about, if you head down, what people might be able to see and what girls might be able to get involved in when they head there.
Yeah, so the initiative's running for 2 months. Like I said, it's running parallel with the Women's Euros. There's a gallery, I believe, at the Shoreditch Box Park, and there are panel talks. There are 3 different panel talks, one of which I'll be involved with, which is on mental health and body image. I believe it's on the 28th of June. There's one on the 22nd of June and one on the 5th of July, I believe. So yeah, you can kind of head to the Box Park website. And yeah, there's a bunch of initiatives happening throughout the 2 months.
Yeah, you mentioned it's about getting girls into sport, but you touched on it just there. It's about sort of talking about some of the issues women face in sport. What do you see a lot of those as, and particularly as a sprinter at the top of your game in athletics? How do you still see women in sport? Do you think a lot's changing and has changed?
Yeah, I think a lot is changing, and I think the conversation is really starting to open up, which I think is great. However, there are still so many barriers that young girls particularly face, and women getting into the industry. I think for me, I'm particularly passionate about that dropout around kind of the age that young girls start their periods. There's a huge dropout around that age. You know, your body is changing a lot. It becomes uncomfortable. You don't really want to talk about it. And we lose so many girls through that period of their life. And I think for me, that's the most important part, is to empower girls to continue to have an open conversation about it, feel comfortable talking about it, and knowing that, you know, even women at the top of their game are still working through these things and still, you know, trying to have these conversations themselves.
Expand a bit more about that, because as a layman, as a man, I'd never really heard of that. That women do drop out because of that, and when that coming of age moment happens, why is that such a thing? Is it fear?
Yeah, I think, you know, periods are still a very taboo subject. People don't want to talk about them. Like you said, I think, you know, half the population don't have them, so they're not even, you know, educated about anything to do with that. I think a lot of it is just not having access to information. You know, it becomes really uncomfortable. You don't want to do sport on your period. You know, a lot of girls are told that you just avoid sport at all costs during that time. I know even I did when I was a young girl. You know, swimming and stuff like that, I'd drop out. And you know, maybe you're going through cramps. It's an uncomfortable time of the month. You don't want to participate. And I think, you know, the more that we can talk about this, and the more that conversation can be open, and, you know, knowing that there are options and that actually there are huge benefits of still doing sport on your period. It actually can help with a lot of those things. I think the more open that we can be about that, the better. Yeah.
And getting back to the event itself, you might not get the next Jodie Williams in terms of the people that turn up, but we might. But it's more about just girls that perhaps aren't interested in sport because they were never exposed to it, getting to see what the benefits can be of getting involved in competition and exercise.
Yeah, hugely. Like I said, I think what is great about the campaign is it's not just elite sportswomen that are involved. It's women involved in all different areas of sport. You know, we have women at the top of their game in broadcasting, in communications, behind the scenes, and I think that's what's so great about the initiative. Sport isn't just about being really good, about being elite. It's, you know, you can't just participate, for one. There are so many benefits of just being involved in sport, but knowing, I think, for girls and women that there are other career avenues within sport itself. I think a lot of girls don't even think about a career in sports at all. And I think that's what's so great. It's just inspiring young girls and women to know that there are other career options. You don't have to be, you know, the best at a sport. You can just be interested and have an interest and still pursue a career in sport, or just honestly participate. Like I said, you know, there are so many benefits of doing exercise and staying active. And I think just inspiring girls and women to just stay involved and stay connected to that world.
Well, that runs at the 3 box parks in London throughout June and July. That coincides with the Women's Euros taking place this summer. You're watching London Live News with James Dickman. A reminder of our top stories coming up after the break. Also on the way, more on the anniversary of the Grenfell Tower fire. 5 years on, we'll hear from Joe Delaney, who lived in the block, on his memories half a decade on.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Let's just have a reminder of our main story this evening. Events are continuing this evening to mark 5 years since the Grenfell Tower fire. The blaze killed 72 people in North Kensington on the 14th of June 2017. Well, these were the scenes at the memorial service which was held this morning at Westminster Abbey. The Bishop of Kensington addressing the congregation, saying there was a sense of injustice still, grief and sadness felt by the entire community following the fire. Well, Theresa May and the Mayor were among those at the service. Tonight, survivors are joining the families of those who died for a silent walk from the base of the tower.
We spend a lot of pretty much the whole year, fighting or campaigning or whatever you want to call it. And today, or the 14th, it was all about remembering the families that we lost. Remembering my uncle. I mean, he was a massive part of my life, and I wish he was around now because I need him now more than I ever did. And, some of the things that he taught me and the lessons that I learned from him, I'm now passing on to my son. And, it makes me happy, but at the same time sad that he's not there to see it. He's not there to see my kids grow up the way he saw us grow up. And, I want to, we want to make sure that we never forget them. We never forget who they were, their personalities, the 18 kids that we lost. I mean, they're not just names, they're not just numbers. They were people with souls, with real lives, and we miss them, and we wish we could have them back. But we know that there's nothing that we can do to make them come back. There's nothing that we can do to heal the pain that we're going through. But at least we remember them together, and through doing what we're doing, hopefully one day they can be remembered, not the way that they are now by this culture of neglect, but by some positivity that came out of it, and people's lives were saved because of them.
Among those taking part in the memorial events is Joe Delaney. Joe is a local resident who lived in an adjacent estate. Joe left his flat and witnessed firsthand as events unfolded. He's since played a vocal part involved in the public inquiry and is a member of the Grenfell Action Group. He joined me earlier.
I think the mood of today at the Abbey is the same as the mood has been everywhere else, to be honest. It's one of exasperation, James. We're 5 years on since this fire. We all expected there to be prosecutions within the first year, not, still be dithering about it within the first 5. And it just seems outrageous to me. When we had riots in London in 2010, we had 24-hour courts. If we even had 5% of that effort put into prosecuting people for Grenfell, you and I probably wouldn't be having this conversation.
So as you see it, Joe, is it very much a community that's still very much feeling the scars? And were they on show today at the Abbey, even though there was perhaps a sense of community that was felt?
Well, I mean, I think in order to show scars, whatever was wounding us would have had to have stopped doing it in order for those to form. I think, wounds are still forming around here. I've maintained since the fire, it wasn't the actual events of the fire itself that traumatized so many people so deeply around here. It was the way we were treated subsequently, because it was just appallingly bad. People had to sleep rough for the first couple of nights in the shadow of the tower where their loved ones were being burned alive. That would have a profound effect upon anyone. And the council have been quite willing to throw money at what it calls Grenfell recovery, but there's no real substance to anything that it's sort of got. And also it's not done any kind of performance indicators, so it doesn't even know how successful or not any of the various projects that it's funded have been. So it seems the council is still continuing to deal with a PR disaster 5 years later. We're still dealing with a humanitarian one.
Yeah. And could you imagine you'd be saying all this 5 years on from what you saw that night? Could you imagine that, even at this stage, there's still been no prosecutions by the police over the disaster?
I mean, that's what just beggars belief about this, We know from Hillsborough that justice delayed is justice denied. So the government knows what kicking these things into the long grass does. It just means that we're less likely to get anyone at all to blame. And, you can't help but wonder, is it actually a bug or is it a feature of their plan that be the case? Because, given the fact that 18% of MPs in general receive income as buy-to-let landlords, and 25% of Conservative MPs receive income as buy-to-let landlords, you can't help but wonder, do they not want to mark their own homework, as it were? And that's why we've seen so little progress in any areas.
Yeah, can you see any hope in all this, Joe, or are you just left exasperated by this whole thing? Have you found any light at the end of the tunnel and perhaps seen anything from today which makes you feel slightly whole again?
No, I mean, seeing the community sort of together again was good. But I do think that, people are just sort of, we're on a hiding to nothing at the moment. We have to see someone see the inside of a jail cell for this. It just cannot be allowed that people get away with murder. Not this egregiously and not this blatantly. Come on, Britain's meant to be better than this. Our current crop of MPs might not be, the most upstanding and, law-abiding ones to sort of, role models to follow. But, we've still got some sense of justice and fair play in this country, and we've just got to have people punished for what they did. At least 72 people died that night. People in this community have died ever since. I can give you names like Stephen Pretty, Clary Mendy-Solomon, Amanda Beckles. These are people who've died either of illness or suicide since the fire as well. There are countless leaseholders who are stuck in buildings with dangerous cladding up and down the country who've committed suicide. Unless something is done substantially by this government, and I would remind you that Boris Johnson promised to implement all of phase 1 in October 2019 when he accepted the report, and yet he still hasn't. Unless something substantial happens, it's not a case of if we see another Grenfell, it's going to be a case of when.
Yeah, on that, Joe, are you surprised to hear that so many buildings in London, over 1,000 it was released yesterday, still have some sort of fire safety issues? Is that all part of the systematic problem as you see it?
I mean, to be honest, I'm surprised it's that low. I know that there are 320 odd high-rise buildings that have got exactly the same cladding as Grenfell. Then there's another 9,000 medium-rise properties that have got exactly the same as Grenfell. And that's just a small proportion of the total number of properties that there are with dangerous cladding of some type.
Sorry, Joe, I was referring to London just with those stats in terms of over 1,000.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. I mean, given how large the figures are, I'm surprised it's that small in London. To be honest, I would have expected there to be way more than that. In some ways, I mean, it's some small relief that there's only that many. Given the fact that there's, at least 20-odd thousand properties across the UK in general, the fact that we've only got 1,000 of them in London is actually good news. And I mean, the fact that that's even considered good news shows you just how poor the situation is.
Joe Delaney there, time for a break. On the way, to infinity and beyond, the new Disney Pixar movie taking us to outer space with the one and only Buzz Lightyear.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to the final part of this evening's programme. Now featuring Captain America star Chris Evans as the voice of the world-famous Space Ranger. Lightyear has had its London premiere. The new movie covers the origin story of Buzz Lightyear, the hero who inspired the toy. Taika Waititi, Uzo Aduba and even Tim Peake lent his voice to the movie. Well, Alicia went down to the blue carpet to chat to some of the stars from the new blockbuster film.
It's the film about the man that inspired the toy. We're here at the premiere of Lightyear.
After a full year of being marooned on this planet, our first test flight is a go. Let's get everyone home.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what they set out to do, to make a science fiction action adventure, not just for kids, but for adults, as all Pixar movies always are. You know, they're great for kids, but adults can enjoy them as well.
Chris, your character travels time in the movie. If you could travel time and go anywhere, where would it be?
You know, I'd probably go to the future. I mean, as much as I'm nostalgic for the past, I'm curious as to how we're doing in 50, 60 years.
Tim, you voiced Mission Control for the movie. What was that like for you, getting in the voice booth?
It was brilliant. I mean, it's a very small part, but what an experience to be involved in a Disney Pixar movie. Great fun.
Have you got to hear it back yet, or is tonight the first time?
No, I got to watch the whole movie last week on the big screen, and it's so exciting. And it's laugh out loud in places as well. It's a great journey. It's a really an emotional journey as well, following Buzz and the team through. So no, I've enjoyed every step of the way. And getting to meet the Disney team and seeing the hard work that goes on behind the scenes has been unbelievable.
Very different from your regular work. What's it been like being part of the whole Disney Pixar machine?
Yeah, very different from my usual work. But do you know what? It's been very similar in some respects. When you see the team working together in a very international environment, what they're trying to achieve, loads of moving parts coming together, the amount of collaboration that's required, it's not dissimilar to preparing for a mission to space. And the end product is something that's really good, really inspiring. I think young people are going to love it, but old people too. We can all take away messages from this movie.
At what stage of your career were you at when the first Toy Story arrived, when Buzz Lightyear appeared?
Yeah, so I was in my early 20s, so I was a pilot, and I was aspiring to be a test pilot, not unlike Buzz in terms of what he's trying to do, pushing the boundaries and exploring new concepts. So for me, it was all about flying when I was watching the first Toy Story movie.
You're here with your family tonight. How is it them coming to see you on the big screen?
Yeah, well, they love it. They're just the excitement here tonight, the energy and the enthusiasm, and it's a brilliant movie, so they're so excited about it.
A year of work for a 4-minute flight. Isn't that something?
We're all ready if you are, sir.
Well, let's go find out if this...
It feels so surreal. I'm just grateful for the experience and just trying to stay present and enjoy every moment of it and have fun. I mean, I love the movie myself. It was enjoyable to watch with my nieces and my nephew. And I even took a couple of lessons myself, so it's definitely impactful.
The same-sex kiss in the film got taken out, put back in, is back in.
Yes.
As a cast member, how do you feel about that?
I'm glad they put it back in. At the end of the day, this movie is the movie that Andy watched that made him fall in love with Buzz Lightyear. And what that essentially says to me is that we're now making sure that we represent in film the faces that have always been a part of the story. And that includes LGBTQ+, that includes women, that includes black women, that includes all people. And so I think it's just important that we show that.
Hello, Buzz. I am Socks, your personal companion robot.
We're being pursued by just a massive robot.
You've obviously been involved in every different aspect that there virtually is in film production. How is it voicing a character? Do you still act while you're in the booth?
It's really different. I'm like an emotive person with my body and with my stupid face and stuff, but to be in the booth where your face means nothing, they still kind of film you for some facial reference, but it's all about your voice, and to be in there it was a massive learning curve, and Angus, the director, really showed me the way, and he held my hand through it, because I didn't realize, there are hundreds of ways to say just a normal sentence, like, anyone need a pen? And it turns out there's a lot of ways you can say it.
Terrifying, and I regret having joined you.
Lightyear!
Let all the children begin.
You both had involvement in Toy Story right from the very start. At what stage did Lightyear become a concept?
About 5.5 years ago. Yeah, maybe almost. Yeah, it'd be September of 2016.
Why did you want to give Buzz his own film?
He's a cool character. He's a cool toy. He's a cool character. It's sci-fi. Who doesn't want to make a sci-fi film? It's pretty much everything that we love in movies, all stuffed into one package.
Yeah, if you're going to stick with a movie for 5.5 years, you have to really love all the elements, and it was a combination of elements that I really do love.
I can provide sleep sounds if you like. I have several options. Summer night, ocean paradise, whale calls.
No. White noise is fine.
Very well.
Good night, Socks.
Good night, Buzz.
Alicia there with some of the cast and creatives. Lightyear is in cinemas from Friday. Now, the Amiki Dance Theatre Company is celebrating their 40th anniversary with a show at the Lyric Hammersmith. They are known for integrating disabled and non-disabled cast members into productions, and this is no different. Featuring an 80-strong team of artists from around the world, the show has been choreographed by Wolfgang Stange, who is the founder of the company. Well, Alicia has been hearing more once again.
To be honest, I never knew it would last 40 years. I never knew. It was just in the beginning. I worked in the community, and I had this idea to bring the different groups together. So I had a blind group, and I had a group at Normansfield for people with learning difficulties. And I just thought, oh, well, why don't we bring them together? And oddly enough, I just was so enthusiastic. I said to the evening group, which was already a mixed blind and disabled and non-disabled dancers, I said, look, I have this idea. Shall we get the people together and create a performance? And there was silence, but nobody opposed me because I was so enthusiastic. And so I said, okay, I'll bring them in next week. And so we started. So after it was all over, a friend of mine from the City Lit said, oh my God, it's the first time. You must go. You must have it documented. And here you have to have some questionnaires, how they felt about it. And I said, oh, well, it's over now. Yeah, no, but it's interesting. And so I said, well, if you do the questionnaire, I'm fine with it. I don't do it. So she did, and she passed out the questionnaire after everything was over. And I had a shock when I read it that some of my blind people said, oh, well, we didn't really want to work together with people, which was called in those days, not learning difficult, but mentally handicapped, because people may think we are handicapped, because they didn't obviously think they were handicapped. So I got a shock. Just because Wolfgang was so enthusiastic, we went ahead. And but after the first rehearsal, we knew this was not going to be the case. You see, and it just shows you. If I had asked that before, and I loved the people, if they had told me they were anxious about it, I would have never started it. So sometimes it's when you have an idea and you're enthusiastic, go for it and wait and see how it will develop. And now here we are, 40 years after, we are still here. But as I said, sometimes one has to be like an elephant in a porcelain shop.
Absolutely. How has your company grown over the years? You're working with an 80-strong cast now.
Well, the 80-strong cast is only because we got those visitors coming. Otherwise, we are roughly about 40, half of it. Not so much. Well, the weird thing is we never advertised. We never asked people, just come and join. And some people stay for one term, one for 1 year, and some have stayed for 40 years. So it's a very moving experience for everybody. We are learning from the newcomers who bring different things in, and they learn from us. So it's really a kind of a cross-fertilization, I would say, yeah.
And how does it work? How do people get involved in performing with you? Is it an audition process?
No. We never audition because the group is there. And when the idea comes for a performance, I would just say, well, I have this idea. Shall we go ahead with this? And if they say yes, all right. And they are contributing, of course, as you realize. It's not just me. I just come with the original idea. And then they are giving me the food, really. I just said, look, here's something. Help me to fill it out. And then we do it, yeah.
And One World, tell me what we can expect from the performance, because you've got a huge number of people involved, haven't you?
Yeah, but as I said, it's only because we got the people coming from abroad and from Wales and from Scotland, of course. Well, it started off just when we realized the difficulties that were happening in the world, particularly with the refugee crisis. At that time, of course, it was Yemen, and still going on, of course. People don't talk about it, sadly. And Afghanistan and all the trouble spots, and Syria and the refugees. And that was very painful to see on the news how people are being treated when they're trying to flee and the rest of it. So that was the original idea, trying to bring to the attention of what people go through who are in that awful situation. Now, of course, 2 years afterwards, it's even more poignant because the Ukraine war and what's happening. So sadly, this is tragically, the theme will not go away. That is a tragedy of it all. But of course, we must have hope, and we do it in the end, the children will help us to get out of this mess in the end. We have to believe in the children, and we have to support the children to have a clear vision of what they want the world to be in the future.
One World is on from the 27th of June until the 2nd of July at the Lyric Hammersmith Theatre. Let's just have one final look at the weather for you now. It's only getting hotter, reaching around 27 degrees tomorrow. Some cloud cover coming in overnight and into Thursday, but staying at around 27 degrees still. Looking ahead to Friday, it's predicted to be reaching 31 degrees during the afternoon, so a very hot week to come. The weekend not looking so good, so do enjoy that sun whilst you can. It's a fleeting weather pattern often here in the capital, isn't it? That's all we've got time for this evening, unfortunately. Do join us again tomorrow evening at the same time. Anthony Baxter will have everything you need to know about London. And for now, from me, take care.